My father said military lawyers knew how to bury courage under paperwork. 12 minutes later, Rear Admiral Miriam Sloan opened a blue folder and read my dead mother's name. The tendons in my right hand locked around the edge of the table. Under my left cuff, the silver field watch my mother had given me pressed against my pulse, its hands still fixed at 2:17. Across the restored armory, 176 people stopped breathing in different ways. A fork paused above a plate, a waiter held a bottle over an empty glass without pouring. My sister turned toward our father, before the Admiral had finished the name. Commander Rebecca Cross. My father stood beside the stage with one hand on the back of his chair. He had spent most of his life learning how to look calm while other people received bad news. That night, his fingers slipped. On the screen behind Admiral Sloan, my mother's service photograph replaced the memorial seal. Navy Nurse Corps, hair pinned tight, eyes that looked severe until you knew how often she stayed after everyone else had gone. Admiral Sloan lowered her gaze to the blue folder. The official record will reflect that Commander Cross directed the movement of 23 wounded personnel before the second strike, she said. The prior finding of abandonment is removed. The room did not erupt. Real shock is quieter than people think. It takes time for an old lie to understand it has been discovered. My father looked at me, not at my mother's photograph. Not at the Admiral, at me. The fear on his face told me the folder contained more than a corrected record. Before I tell you why my father feared that blue folder more than any accusation, subscribe and stay with me, because what Admiral Sloan revealed next would not only clear my mother's name, it would expose what he had chosen to protect instead. But none of that began at the dinner. 36 hours earlier, I was alone in my office, holding a watch that had not moved in 23 years. The clinic occupied the second floor of a converted insurance office outside Arlington. Beige carpet, narrow windows, a thermostat that believed every veteran preferred the temperature of a meat locker. The cold always found the two fingers in my right hand that had never healed correctly after a shipboard evacuation drill at Naval Station Norfolk. Before leaving the Navy at the rank of commander, I had served there as a judge advocate. The kind of officer people forgot was in the room until a signature, a regulation, or a missing page changed what everyone thought they knew. At 7 in the evening, my desk lamp and a government records portal were the only lights left on. The portal had displayed the same 3 words for 41 days. Final administrative review. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the watch. It was silver military issue with a scratch near the 4 and no second hand. The hour and minute hands had stopped at 2:17. My mother placed it on our kitchen table the night she came home from deployment. I was 19. She looked smaller than I remembered and older than the calendar allowed. She did not tell me about the field hospital or the second strike. She tapped the watch once and said everything changed at 2:17. Years later, after she died, I found the investigation. According to the official record, everything had changed because she failed. I set the watch beside 2 folders. The first belonged to a former petty officer named Marcus Bell. That afternoon, the Navy had corrected his discharge record after 17 years. Then he said, "Commander, my daughter thinks I quit." I told him the corrected record would say otherwise. The second folder belonged to Commander Rebecca Cross. 8 years of filings sat inside, medical movement logs, transport manifests, archive requests, denials, a petition that had started as 11 pages and grown into a history of how easily a conclusion survives when nobody wants to check it. I refreshed the portal. Final administrative review. My phone vibrated. Claire rarely called after business hours unless our father had asked her to do something she did not want to ask me herself. "Please tell me you still own something formal," she said. "Dad wants you at the legacy dinner. Admiral Miriam Sloan is the keynote speaker. He says the whole family should be there." The name made me sit straighter. Sloan had advised a review involving old Navy medical records, though nobody had told me which cases were included. Years earlier, she and my father had served on the same Navy Medical Readiness Board. Now her office held the department's delegated authority to release the final findings, a form of power even retired flag officers could not overrule. "Did he say why it matters now?" Claire hesitated. "He said tradition matters now." That sounded like my father. He used words like tradition when the accurate word made him uncomfortable. "All right," I said. I'll be there. After we hung up, I placed Marcus Bell's corrected decision with the outgoing mail and returned my mother's file to the drawer. The watch stayed in my hand. I left it on my desk until the building's motion sensors turned off the hallway lights. Then I opened the drawer again. Agreeing to attend the dinner had changed nothing about the case, but it had changed the distance between the case and my father. For 8 years, I had dealt with his name as ink on the final page of an endorsement. In less than 2 days, I would have to look at the hand that signed it. I pulled out my mother's file and turned to the section I knew without needing the tabs. The first clue had not looked like evidence. It looked like bad pagination. Annex C ended with a casualty count and a notation that additional medical documentation followed. The next page was marked Annex E. There was no Annex D. Most missing pages are not mysteries. They are scanning errors. Duplicate labels, damaged microfilm, or some clerk's failure to feed both sides of a sheet through a machine. I had spent enough years in military law to know that paperwork was rarely elegant and almost never sinister. But the patient movement log created a second problem. 23 identification codes had been entered between 1:48 and 2:11 in the morning. Each code showed a wounded service member being transferred from the forward treatment area to protected transport. The official investigation said my mother withdrew from her assigned position without arranging the movement of patients under her authority. Both things could not be true. I had found the log 8 years earlier in a records request that was supposed to contain nothing new. It arrived on a compact disc inside a padded envelope, along with a form letter explaining that the material might include duplicates. Then I noticed the handwritten total in the upper right corner. 23. My mother always totaled a page before signing it. Grocery lists, school permission forms, deployment inventories. She trusted arithmetic more than memory. The same number appeared on a transport manifest stored under a different command. Annex D had existed, I still did not know who. I closed the folder and looked at the watch. 2:17, the movement log ended 6 minutes earlier. At 8 the next morning, my father called. He did not begin with hello. I understand Claire convinced you. She told me you wanted the family there. I do. His voice had not changed much since retirement. It still had the calm, measured rhythm of someone accustomed to speaking while other people took notes. Admiral Sloan has done important work preserving the integrity of the nurse corps, he said. Her remarks will be about duty, tradition, and the burden of command. The word burden was deliberate. My father never wasted words. He placed them. I have read some of her work, I said. I assumed you had. There was a brief silence, not an empty one. A tested one. Then he asked, is the petition still under review? It is. What stage? I looked at the portal. Final administrative review. His breath changed, only slightly. Someone who had not spent years listening to witnesses decide whether to lie would not have noticed. Those status labels are often meaningless, he said. Sometimes, I would prefer tomorrow evening not become an extension of your office. I was invited as your daughter, then come as my daughter. He said it gently enough that another person might have heard affection. I heard a condition, and what does that require? That you remember who your mother was. I remember exactly who she was. Rebecca understood that service sometimes means accepting a conclusion you do not like. There were several answers I could have given him. None would have changed what he believed, so I said I will see you tomorrow. Before ending the call, he added, try not to arrive looking for a fight, Evelyn. I am not bringing one. After he hung up, I removed every document from the leather case I normally carried to formal events. No petition, no movement log, no copy of the endorsement bearing his signature. No highlighted page showing Annex C followed by Annex E. I left the case in the bottom drawer and locked it. That decision mattered later. People would say I had arranged what happened at the dinner. Some assumed I had known Admiral Sloan would reveal the corrected records. Others believed I had placed the evidence in her hands and waited for my father to humiliate me. I had done neither. The only thing I carried from the case was not evidence at all. I fastened my mother's watch beneath the cuff of my dress. Its hand still pointed to 2:17. Claire picked me up the following afternoon in a borrowed black sedan that smelled faintly of new leather and sawdust. She ran an architectural restoration company, which meant sawdust followed her into places where sawdust had no business being. A roll of drawings occupied the back seat. You are working on the way to a formal dinner? I asked. I am trying to keep 11 people employed. The foundation is announcing the memorial expansion tonight. What expansion? The new East Wing. Education rooms, archive space, a permanent exhibit for medical service personnel. How much? $18 million. Dad is the public chair. 3 donor commitments are still conditional. Together they are worth $6,400,000. And your company? We are one of the final 2 firms. There it was, not a conspiracy, something more ordinary and often more powerful. Payroll, reputation, a future project carrying our father's name. You think my presence could threaten the contract? I think anything that embarrasses him could threaten it. He invited me, yes. Why? Claire swallowed. Maybe he believes you will behave. Claire's fingers tightened around the steering wheel, and she kept her eyes on the road after saying it. Have you ever read Mom's record? Her jaw moved once. No, the investigation, no, the petition, she said nothing. Silence inside a family is rarely empty. Usually it is crowded with the things everyone has agreed not to make another person choose between. The restored armory appeared at the end of the block, its old brick washed in white light. A temporary donor wall stood beside the entrance. At the top, beneath the foundation seal, were the words. The Daniel Cross Memorial Education Wing. The donor wall made the purpose visible. My father was not only protecting what people believed about the past. He was building that belief into stone. The donor wall was the first thing guests saw after the coat check. My father's name stood at the top in brushed brass letters. Below it were the names of defense contractors, retired officers, hospital systems, and families who had paid to preserve the memory of service. A volunteer handed Claire and me our place cards. Claire's read Table 3. Mine read Table 16. Table 16 sat near the service doors with legal volunteers, 2 empty chairs, and a speaker column that blocked part of the stage. The central tables were arranged by rank, donor level, and organizational importance. Retired flag officers sat nearest the podium, senior sponsors sat beside them. Active duty guests were distributed where their uniforms would be most visible in photographs. My father was at Table 1. I had once held the rank of commander. That information was not printed anywhere on my place card. Under affiliation it said Cross Veterans Legal Clinic. Claire stared at it. I did not do this, I know. I can ask Nina to change it. No, Evelyn, you belong at the family table. I looked toward Table 1. My father was laughing with a former Secretary of the Navy, one hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. The card says where they want me, I said. That does not mean you have to accept it. Tonight I would rather know where they want me. One of the event coordinators called Claire toward the donor reception. She touched my arm before leaving. I will come back. I believed she intended to. Intentions are one of the gentler ways families fail each other. At Table 16, the air conditioning vent blew downward hard enough to lift the edge of the white tablecloth. It rose and fell every 7 seconds. I counted the rhythm without meaning to. 7, 7, 7. The watch beneath my sleeve remained still. A man across from me folded his place card into a sharper crease. Luis Ortega, it read. He was close to 60, with broad hands, a narrow black tie, and the careful posture of someone whose back hurt more than he admitted. You are with the legal clinic? He asked. Yes. Do you handle record corrections? We do. Discharges too? Sometimes. He reached into his jacket, then stopped before taking anything out. My granddaughter is applying to college, he said. She searched my name. She found the word dereliction. He pronounced it slowly, as though it belonged to someone else. What does your record say happened? That I abandoned assigned medical stores during an evacuation. Did you? No. I moved blood units into a concrete drainage channel because the refrigeration truck had been hit. 12 hours later, somebody found the truck empty. And the blood used. He looked at the folded place card in his hands. The report never followed it. I gave him the clinic's name and told him what records to request first. I did not mention my rank. I did not mention my mother. Luis removed a small piece of paper from his wallet. It had been folded into quarters so many times the creases had begun to split. He checked something written inside and put it away before I could read it. I keep names, he said, people who might remember. A photographer called for the legal volunteers to move closer together. Luis gave me a tired smile. Claire appeared beside my chair. Dad wants to see us. She led me through a side corridor behind the donor reception. The armory's original brick had been cleaned but not covered. Brass plaques marked the rooms that would eventually become the archive wing, education center, and medical service gallery. Claire stopped beside a rendering mounted on an easel. The design showed glass walls rising behind the old brick, with my father's name above the main entrance. A smaller brass key hung from a chain around her wrist. "What is that?" "Coat archive, the lock sticks. Nina gave it to me in case the staff need access." She turned the rendering toward me. "My firm designed the preservation plan. Not the donor strategy, not the naming package, but the contract depends on both." "Yes, a server passed us carrying a tray of champagne." Claire lowered her voice. "Please do not make me choose between believing you and paying my employees." "I did not bring anything, I know. No, Claire. I brought no records, no petition, no copy of Dad's endorsement." Her eyes moved to my wrist. "Just the watch? Just the watch." "That may be worse for him." Before I could ask what she meant, my father entered the corridor. He wore his dress blue uniform, although he had been retired for 7 years. The ribbons across his chest were arranged with the precision of a man who understood that memory could be curated. He kissed Claire's cheek, then he looked at me. His eyes moved over my dress, my empty hands, and finally the edge of silver visible beneath my cuff. "You still wear that," he said, "sometimes. It has not worked in years." "I know. You always did have trouble letting go of things after they stopped functioning." I pulled my sleeve over the watch. "You asked me to come. I asked my daughters to attend an important evening. And I am here." He studied my face. "You did not bring the case?" "No," his shoulders released before he could stop them. It was a small movement. For me, it was louder than a confession. "Good," he said. "Then perhaps we can have one evening that is not about correcting the dead." The sentence stayed between us. My mother had been dead for 12 years. The record was still alive every time someone opened it. My father glanced toward the ballroom. "Miriam will speak after dinner. She understands that institutions survive because some decisions remain final." "You invited her for that reason?" "I invited her because she respects duty." He straightened his left cuff. He had done the same thing before telling me my mother did not want an appeal. Before saying that families of senior officers could not behave as though rules applied differently to them. "Please do not embarrass Claire," he said, "not me." "Not yourself, Claire." He had chosen the person whose livelihood made obedience easiest to defend. A door opened behind him. Rear Admiral Miriam Sloan entered the corridor carrying a blue folder. She wore formal service dress and reading glasses with thin dark frames. Beside her was a civilian man holding 2 sealed document cases. My father's expression changed. His eyes moved from Miriam to the sealed cases, measuring the distance to both. He stepped forward. "Miriam, I did not realize you were bringing counsel." The civilian man extended his hand. "Jordan Pierce. Office of Civilian Counsel." My father shook it. "What matter requires counsel at a dinner?" Jordan's expression remained polite. "I am here to confirm administrative authority and record provenance." My father looked at the document cases, then at the blue folder. Admiral Sloan did not offer him either one. "The final program changed this morning," she said. "Nina did not tell me. She was not authorized to." When Miriam shifted the folder beneath her arm, I saw the tabs along the edge. 17 of them, each marked with a name I could not read. My father saw them too. For the first time that evening, he forgot to straighten his cuff. The ballroom doors opened before he could ask another question. Nina Bell, the event director, appeared with a headset pressed to one ear and a stack of red timing cards in her hand. "Admiral Sloan, we are seating the keynote party now." My father stepped toward her. "There has been a program change." Nina glanced at Miriam, then at Jordan's sealed document cases. "I received the revised sequence. From whom?" "The department liaison. I chair this event, and the revision carries an official release restriction." Nina said it without challenge. She was trying to keep 176 guests, a live broadcast, 6 vendors, and a municipal building schedule moving in the same direction. That made her harder for my father to control. My father remained in the corridor for half a second too long, staring at the folder. Then the public version of him returned. His shoulders settled. His mouth softened. He touched Claire's elbow and guided us toward the doors as though he had arranged every detail himself. The opening ceremony began with a color guard, an invocation, and a memorial roll call. Names appeared on the screen in white letters over a dark blue field. The audience stood when instructed and sat when instructed. Glasses were filled, plates arrived in practiced silence. From table 16, I could see only part of the stage unless I leaned to the left of the speaker column. I could see my father clearly. He sat beside Miriam at table 1, smiling whenever a camera passed. Jordan sat at the far end with the sealed cases beneath his chair. My father spoke to him twice. Jordan answered briefly both times. On the third attempt, he pointed toward the podium, indicating the matter belonged to the program rather than the dinner table. My father's smile held. His left hand tightened around the stem of his water glass. The memorial roll ended. Applause moved through the room. My father rose for the foundation address. Service, he began, is often misunderstood by those who encounter it only through records. Records matter, procedures matter, accountability matters. But none of those things can fully reproduce the moment in which a commander must choose with incomplete information and lives waiting on the answer. Several retired officers nodded. My father knew his audience. He reminded them of fog, uncertainty, impossible choices, and the danger of allowing people who had never held command to judge decisions with the comfort of hindsight. Nothing he said was entirely false. That was why he was effective. A military cannot function, he continued, if every hard choice becomes an accusation years later. Nor can it survive if courage is buried beneath enough paperwork that no one remembers what decision was required in the first place. Then he looked toward table 16. Military lawyers have an honorable purpose. But some of them begin to believe that if a page can be reopened, every sacrifice may be retried. The laughter faded, faces turned toward us. One of the volunteers beside me lowered her eyes to her plate. Luis remained still, his folded place card between his fingers. My father had not used my name. He did not need to. Social humiliation works best when the target is obvious, and the aggressor can later claim he was speaking generally. I felt the watch beneath my cuff, the tablecloth lifted. 7 seconds. Settled. 7 seconds. I did not look away from him. When I was a junior attorney, an older captain taught me that silence during questioning created pressure. Most people rushed to fill it. They added details, corrected themselves, revealed which part of the truth frightened them. My father had taught me the same lesson long before law school. He simply had not expected me to use it by doing nothing. He spoke about casualty notifications, failed operations, orders that saved one group and exposed another. The room listened differently now, not as donors, as people remembering things they had never explained to their families. Command is not the privilege of being right, he said. It is the obligation to accept responsibility when no answer is clean. That sentence earned the first real applause. I had defended officers whose decisions looked simple only after maps, weather reports, radio logs, and casualties were arranged in neat chronological order. My father was not wrong that hindsight could become vanity. He was wrong about what had happened to my mother. There is a difference between judging an imperfect decision and maintaining a conclusion after the evidence beneath it collapses. My mother's record was not painful because it described a hard choice. It was false because it removed the part that made the choice understandable. My father knew that distinction. There are families who spend years trying to renegotiate grief. They search archives, they challenge findings, they convince themselves that love requires a different official answer. Claire's head turned sharply toward him. At the center tables, no one moved. He had crossed from policy into confession, though most of the room did not know it yet. A family can destroy itself by refusing to accept that service has a cost. His eyes found mine. I kept both hands flat on the table. I met his eyes without moving. His next breath came half a beat late. He looked down at his notes before continuing, then applause began at one donor table. Another joined. My father lifted his chin. The room was returning to him. He told them institutions depended on finality. That discipline required the living to respect decisions made by those who had carried responsibility. That no military could survive if every generation placed the last one on trial. He never said false records should remain false. He built his argument carefully around that missing sentence. Tradition is not blindness, he said. It is the humility to understand that we inherit decisions we were not there to make. A military family must know when the past has been honored. And when it must be allowed to rest. The applause rose quickly. Officers stood at 2 central tables, donors followed. Claire remained seated, so did I. My father looked across the room and saw enough people standing to believe he had won. The muscles around his mouth loosened for half a second. Then he covered it by lifting his chin. He thanked them and glanced toward Miriam as if offering her a stage he had already defined. Then he looked at me one more time. My silence should have been enough. Instead, it made him greedy. He returned both hands to the podium. "There is one more thing," he said. "My late wife, Commander Rebecca Cross, understood responsibility better than anyone I have ever known." The applause stopped before he reached my mother's last name. The room held still. My father let the silence settle around her name. "She faced a decision under attack," he continued. "A decision no person should be asked to make. When the investigation concluded that she had left patients under her authority, she did not hide behind rank. She did not blame the institution. She accepted the finding." The watch beneath my cuff felt suddenly cold. He had told that version before. At memorial services, at foundation luncheons, once during an interview about military families and sacrifice. He always removed the same detail. My mother had never said the finding was true. She had only refused to destroy younger officers to defend herself. My father turned slightly toward table 16. "Some people believe love means reopening every wound until the answer becomes easier to live with. They call it justice, but there comes a point when refusing to accept responsibility becomes a betrayal of the very person you claim to defend." Claire whispered, "Dad, stop." He did not hear her. Or chose not to. Rebecca accepted the cost of command. Those who continue trying to erase that cost do not honor her. They dishonor the courage it took for her to carry it. My hand left the watch. I pulled my cuff back and let the silver face remain visible. For years I had imagined the moment my father finally admitted the record was incomplete. In every version, his shoulders dropped. He asked to see the missing page. He said my mother's name without turning it into a lesson. I had never prepared for the possibility that he still believed the lie was useful. The tablecloth lifted against my knee. 7 seconds. Settled. 7 seconds. I kept my eyes on him. My mother had needed the truth. I had needed my father. I did not cover the watch again. Nina stepped toward the stage with the red timing card raised. My father glanced at it. Then he delivered the final sentence as if he had earned it. "A family that serves must know when to let the past remain buried." No one applauded. The silence after a cruel sentence is different from the silence after a wise one. People shift in their chairs. They search the faces around them to learn what they are permitted to feel. My father looked toward the central tables. No one stood. Rear Admiral Miriam Sloan rose. She did not wait for him to invite her to the podium. "Admiral Cross," she said, "the announcement I was directed to make tonight concerns the record you just described." A sound passed through the room. My father's hand tightened on the podium. "Miriam, perhaps the scheduled keynote would be more appropriate." "This is the scheduled keynote." Nina lowered the timing card. That small motion changed the room. My father was no longer controlling the clock. Miriam climbed the steps and stopped beside him. For 1 second, they stood beneath the foundation seal together. 2 retired admirals, 2 versions of service. Then she placed the blue folder on the podium. "I was invited to speak about tradition," Miriam said. "Tradition has value when it carries forward what is honorable. It becomes something else when it requires an institution to preserve what it can no longer defend as accurate." Jordan carried the sealed document cases to a small table beside the screen. He broke the first seal and removed a stack of folders marked with red tabs. My father looked from the folders to Miriam. "What is this?" "A completed review of historical medical service records." The screen changed. The memorial seal disappeared. In its place appeared a simple heading: Official Record Correction Review. 17 cases. Louis stopped folding his place card. Miriam opened the blue folder. Over the past 4 years, the Department of the Navy reviewed a group of records connected by missing medical annexes, incomplete transport documentation, and adverse findings that could not be supported by the full archival record. My father's face remained composed. Only his right thumb moved against the side of the podium. "Each case was evaluated separately," Miriam continued. "Each decision was supported by independent documentation. This is not a ceremonial pardon. It is not a reconsideration based on sympathy. It is a correction of records the government has determined are inaccurate." Jordan stepped to the microphone. "The board does not award courage," he said. "It corrects what the government can no longer defend as accurate." He opened the first document case. Inside were 17 sealed decisions. The tabs I had seen in the corridor were attached to names. Real names. people who had carried official language like a weight for years. Miriam added that each person or lawful representative had authorized public acknowledgement. Then she began reading, Petty Officer First Class Marlene Webb. A woman near Table 9 covered her mouth. The screen displayed a service photograph, then a short corrected finding. Improper abandonment removed, medical evacuation actions verified. Marlene stood slowly. The man beside her stood with her, one hand beneath her elbow. There was no applause. The moment was too private for applause. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Arthur Kell. A gray-haired man near the rear of the room closed his eyes before standing. Lieutenant Joshua Reed. Another photograph appeared. Another finding disappeared. Miriam read each name in the same measured tone. No performance, no dramatic pause. The dignity came from refusing to treat the corrections as entertainment. At table 16, Luis had gone pale. His hands were flat on the table. I looked at him. He shook his head once, warning me not to ask. Miriam turned another page, Hospital Corpsman First Class Luis Ortega. The folded place card slipped from his fingers. For a moment, he did not stand. His eyes remained on the screen. The corrected finding appeared beneath his photograph. Dereliction finding removed. Emergency preservation and transfer of medical blood supplies verified. Luis made a sound that did not become a word. The woman beside him rose first and pulled his chair back. He stood with both hands gripping the table. Across the room, people began to understand that table 16 was not where unimportant people had been placed. It was where unfinished records had been seated. Luis looked at me. You knew no, it was the truth. He glanced toward the blue folder. There are more, Miriam continued, one name, then another. A daughter began crying before her father stood. A retired captain remained seated but raised 2 fingers to his temple. One family held hands across an empty chair. By the 12th name, my father was no longer watching Miriam. He was watching the tabs disappear. 5 remained. Miriam read 4 more names without changing her cadence. Claire came to table 16 and stood behind my chair. Her hand rested on the brass key at her wrist. 1 tab remained in the blue folder. My father looked at me. His thumb stopped moving against the podium. The muscles along his jaw tightened once. He knew one of the names before Miriam read it. Then his eyes dropped to the sealed routing file beside Jordan. His hand left the podium. Rear Admiral Sloan lifted the final name tab. Commander Rebecca Cross, Navy Nurse Corps. My mother's service photograph appeared on the screen. The severe mouth, the straight collar, the narrow silver bars on her shoulders. A woman preserved at the exact age when the government decided the worst sentence in her record would become the final one. Then I saw the small crease beside her left eye. She had gotten it from squinting into sunlight during my soccer games. The watch pressed into my wrist, but I could no longer feel my pulse beneath it. My father's hand slid from the podium. Rear Admiral Sloan read from the decision. The prior finding states that Commander Cross withdrew from the forward treatment area without arranging for the movement of wounded personnel under her authority. She turned the page. The full archival record does not support that conclusion. The corrected record reflects that Commander Cross ordered and coordinated the transfer of 23 wounded service members before the second strike. 23 people the final investigation had written out of the story. Miriam continued. Commander Cross remained at the treatment area with patients who could not be moved safely. The finding that she abandoned her duty station is removed. An elderly woman in a nurse corps pin tried to stand and could not. She lowered herself again, one hand over her mouth. I read every word on the screen. The corrected finding carried the seal of the Department of the Navy and the certification of the Board for Correction of Naval Records. For more than 20 years, my father had spoken about Rebecca's acceptance of responsibility, as though it were the noblest part of her life. Now the screen said the responsibility had never belonged to her. Then she said, a corrected record does not rewrite history. It removes the part someone was afraid to leave in it. Jordan Pierce opened the second document case. He placed 5 separate files on the table beside the podium. The decision in Commander Cross's case does not rest on a single recovered page, he said. The board reviewed the original patient movement log, an independent casualty transport manifest, a radio traffic summary, the recovered medical addendum, and the accession records establishing when those documents entered government custody. He opened the first file. The movement log records 23 patient identification codes transferred between 1:48 and 2:11 in the morning. The next, the transport manifest maintained by a separate command contains the same 23 codes. The next, the radio summary records requests for protected transport before the second strike. Jordan opened the fourth folder. The recovered addendum identifies which patients could be moved, which could not, and the personnel ordered to remain. In the upper right corner of the addendum was a handwritten total. 23, my mother's habit. She had counted everything before she signed it. The handwritten total is consistent with Commander Cross's entries across 3 authenticated medical logs from the same deployment. The final investigation packet moved directly from Annex C to Annex E, Jordan said. The recovered addendum was designated Annex D. The board determined that the omission materially altered the meaning of the investigation. Miriam closed the name section and turned to an unmarked case history divider in the blue folder. This review began with a petition submitted 8 years ago, she said. The petition identified discrepancies in Commander Cross's record and later assisted reviewers in recognizing the same archival defect across 16 additional cases. Jordan read from the case history. The original petition was researched, drafted, and pursued by former Navy Judge Advocate Commander Evelyn Cross. Every face near table 16 turned toward me. My father's did not. He looked at the documents. For most of my adult life, my family had described my work as an inability to let the dead rest. Now an official record called it the reason 17 cases had been found. Commander Cross, would you please stand? This is not for recognition of rank, she said. The people whose records were corrected have a right to know who kept their cases alive. Luis placed his palm on the table. Stand, he whispered. I pushed my chair back. Table 16 was no longer hidden by the speaker column. From where I stood, I could see each person whose name had been read. Marlene Webb stood first. Then Arthur Kell. Luis straightened beside me, his hands trembling openly now. The other veterans and medical personnel whose records had been corrected rose one by one. They did not face the stage, they faced me. No applause came. The silence was heavier and more generous than applause. Then a retired Navy captain at table 5 stood. A nurse corps commander followed. Another officer rose near the donor tables. Enough did. My father remained beside the podium. He had spent his career standing while rooms watched him. Now he was the only person on the stage who seemed smaller because he had remained upright. I looked at my mother's photograph. I opened my hand and found 4 crescent marks in my palm. Blood returned to my fingers in slow, painful pulses. The corrected decision had restored my mother's record. It had named what she did. It had removed what she did not do. Jordan placed the routing file beneath the document camera. Annex C, Annex E, no Annex D. This notice was sent to the task group chief of staff before command endorsement, he said. It states that the medical addendum referenced in the casualty log was not included in the consolidated investigation packet. My father's name appeared beneath the acknowledgement block. Captain Daniel Cross, the signature was his. I knew the angle of the D. I had seen it on birthday cards, permission slips, and the papers authorizing my mother's burial at Arlington. My father had known the packet was incomplete before he approved the conclusion built from it. A chair scraped near the stage. A donor near the stage folded his pledge card and placed it inside his jacket. The former secretary at table 1 leaned away from my father. Jordan spoke before anyone could turn implication into accusation. The records do not establish that Admiral Cross removed the addendum, altered a document, or directed another person to falsify the investigation. My father looked up. For 1 second, my father's shoulders loosened. Then Jordan continued. They established that he was notified the packet was incomplete before signing the command endorsement. His shoulders drew tight again. Miriam removed her reading glasses. The instruction to exclude Annex D was issued during command legal consolidation by then Captain Adrian Weller, she said. The stated reason was that the addendum did not alter the principal finding. Weller had died 6 years earlier. He could not explain the instruction. He could not be turned into the only person responsible. Miriam looked at my father. The command endorsement remained discretionary. Nina muted it before he could speak. A member of the Foundation board approached Nina and asked for a private room. Another requested that the announcement about the memorial wing be removed from the program. Claire's phone began vibrating. Those are donors, she said. A reporter called my name. Another asked whether I planned to seek action against my father. I walked away without answering. The corrected decision had not been issued to punish him. I would not reduce my mother's restoration to a daughter's public revenge. Louise caught up with me near the service corridor. Names filled both sides of the paper in small handwriting. Near the bottom was my mother's name, Commander Rebecca Cross. I saw her once after the first strike, he said. She was moving patients by priority, not by rank. A lieutenant commander tried to force his way onto the first transport. What did she do? She told him the man beside him had 6 minutes of blood left and his insignia could wait. But she was there, a tired woman making decisions while people shouted over her. I thought if I found enough names, one of them might prove I had not abandoned the blood supplies. But now my granddaughter will find something else when she searches me. The board suspended the memorial announcement, Claire said. 2 donors want an emergency review, one has already withdrawn. That is what he trained us to say whenever his choices reached our lives. We need to speak privately, my father said. You knew, Claire said. The record shown tonight was incomplete in its own way. You were notified the addendum was missing, I said. Did you ask to see it? Then he straightened his left cuff. I had 2 daughters, a wife who was ill, a command already under review. I made the decision that kept this family intact. I protected all of you. You understand institutional triage better than anyone in this family, he told me. You know a leader sometimes accepts an imperfect record to prevent greater damage. No, I said, a leader accepts responsibility for an imperfect decision. He does not ask someone else to live inside a false one. For 23 years, every place had been the wrong place. Claire looked down at the brass key around her wrist. Then she walked to an unmarked door beside the coat check and inserted it into the lock. Beyond the door was a narrow archive room lined with empty coat racks and acid-free storage boxes. No cameras, she said, no donors, no board. For the first time that night, he had no audience left to persuade. I followed him inside. The room smelled of coats, old brick, and acid-free cardboard. Empty brass hangers lined the wall, a single fluorescent tube buzzed above us. My father stood beneath it, still wearing the expression he had used through congressional hearings, casualty briefings, and memorial services. I held the corrected decision against my chest. May I see the original? He asked. You saw it on the screen. I want to read the full decision. You can have a copy. I was her husband, and I was her counsel of record. You were her daughter. I was both. My father removed his uniform cap and placed it on an empty shelf. His hair was flattened where the band had rested. Evelyn, the packet I received was not presented as fraudulent. Weller told me Annex D was duplicative. You were told it was missing. Did you know what it contained? Did you know it contained her patient movement record? I knew it concerned movement. Did you ask? The task group was already under investigation. Rebecca's medical judgment was being questioned. Weller believed the addendum would create conflicting findings and prolong the inquiry. And the endorsement was yours. He rubbed his thumb over the edge of his cap, turning it a quarter turn on the shelf before answering. I had hours, he said, not years, hours. Your mother was exhausted. She was ill. There were junior nurses and corpsmen facing interviews that could have ended their careers. A wider inquiry would have exposed every failure in that facility. So you closed it on her. I closed it before it consumed all of us. Rebecca understood what command required. She knew someone would carry the finding. She was the senior medical officer. She carried something that was not true. She carried responsibility. No, she carried your solution. I protected this family. No, Claire said from the door. You protected the version of this family that kept you honorable. My promotion paid for your education. My retirement benefits helped your mother through treatment. The foundation work has supported veterans across this state. Mom needed the truth, I said. I needed my father. You gave both of us silence. My father sat on the edge of a wooden bench beneath the coat racks. I thought she agreed. She stopped fighting. That is not the same thing? No, Claire said. My father looked down at his hands. She told me not to destroy the careers of the people beneath her. She did not tell you to sign a lie, I said. I did not know it was a lie. You knew the record was incomplete. I knew every record from that night was incomplete. Then you had no right to call one of them final. My father stared at the decision. I am proud of what you accomplished. You found what no one else found, he continued. You forced the Navy to correct 17 cases. Your mother would have been proud. You do not get to become proud of me only after an admiral tells you to. I have always been proud of you. No, You were proud when I was quiet enough not to threaten your story. That is not fair, neither was her record. Do you intend to destroy everything I built? I did not invite Miriam, I did not schedule the announcement. I did not bring a single page into that ballroom. Give me the original, no, I should be allowed to take it home. Why? I opened my bag and removed the duplicate Jordan had given me after the announcement. I placed the copy on the bench beside him. You may have this. And the original stays with me. My father picked up the copy. Will you speak to me after tonight? I do not know. Claire opened the door. He remained beneath the fluorescent tube, holding a copy of the truth he had once chosen not to see. I carried the original out with me. The air conditioning lifted the edge of the nearest tablecloth, then let it fall. I waited for myself to count. I did not. I am not going to ask you to forgive him, Claire said. Thank you. I should have read Mom's record, yes. I chose not to know. She drove me back to the clinic. When you decide whether you will speak to him again, decide for yourself. Not for Mom, not for me, I will. It was after midnight when I carried the original decision upstairs. I opened the drawer and removed her file. I placed the corrected decision on top of the investigation. Then I removed the watch from my wrist. The hand still pointed to 217. I set it beside the decision. But the story held at 217 had finally been allowed to move forward. I stamped the file closed. The next morning, Jordan sent the finalized distribution list for all 17 corrected records. I prepared a letter for each family. Each clock explained what had changed, which finding had been removed, and where the corrected record would now appear. Your granddaughter will find the truth. Around noon, a junior attorney named Maya stopped at my door. What happens to the related review requests? She asked. Instead, I placed the new case list in her hands. You will lead them. With supervision, with support. For the first time in years, my desk did not contain an active matter bearing my mother's name. My father called twice that afternoon. Before 5, I mailed the 17 letters. The watch remained beside my mother's corrected decision. I left it there and walked out of the office before the sky became dark. 6 weeks later, the foundation board voted 9-2 to remove my father's name from the East Wing. 2 of the 3 conditional donor commitments, together worth $4,100,000, were withdrawn. The third remained after the board placed the archive under independent oversight. My father resigned as public chair the morning before the vote. The project continued without his name. The Navy did not give my mother back the years she spent beneath a false finding. It did not return the conversations our family avoided or the choices my father defended until defense became identity. A corrected record cannot do that. It can only refuse to keep repeating the harm. That turned out to be enough. Marlene Webb's son found a new line in her service history. Arthur Kell received a letter with the adverse finding removed. Luis called the clinic after his granddaughter searched his name again. He did not tell me what she said. He held the phone for a moment, breathing hard, and then whispered, "She found it." I did not forgive my father because an official board exposed him. I did not condemn him because a room finally looked away. I let the corrected record stand where his explanation had stood for 23 years, and I stopped confusing silence with peace. If this story reminded you of someone who was forced to carry a lie in silence, share it with them. Some truths arrive late, but late is not the same as lost. The watch stopped at 217, the truth did not.